On today's episode of the Cryptoverse. You know, I'm sick to death of people talking about bubbles and how cryptocurrencies are in a bubble without having a freaking clue what a bubble is. So I'm going to spend the whole episode today talking about bubbles to clarify the issue. So all of that coming up on today's episode of the Cryptoverse, so stay right there. Hi there guys, welcome to the latest episode of the Cryptoverse, your regular dose of news and commentary on Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and blockchains. I am your host, Chris Coney, the founder of Cryptoversity, which is the online school where you can learn about Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and blockchains. Find out more about that at cryptoversity.com. So today we're doing a podcast-style screen capture episode because I'm traveling today, going to London to the GPS Awards event, and then I'm going to USI Tech Live on Saturday, which is a cryptocurrency event, to see Davin Michaels, who's one of those speakers. And then I'll be coming back to Grimsby from London. So anyway, also we're doing Sketchbook today. This is I don't think you guys have seen this before, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm going to sketch out this whole thing. So I'm explaining exactly what a bubble is and why they exist. Now this explanation is based on a system of logic. It's not my opinion, so you can't reasonably respond to this by saying, Chris is an idiot, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Instead, you'll have to point out a flaw in my logic and then offer a correction. Otherwise, I'll take absolutely no notice of your comment and I'll probably just delete it. So those are the rules. Let's lay them down. Let's begin. So let us use good old Bitcoin for this example. Bitcoin's right there. Now, the model I'm going to present is universal. It just requires a slightly different application depending on the specifics of the digital asset that you're talking about. So let's say right now, it's a pound sign. I mean dollars. So let's say right now, a Bitcoin is priced at $6,000. Let me scrub that out. So that price is arrived at by combining two types of value. Let's call the first one the utility value, and then let's call the other one perceived value. Perceived, or we could also call this speculative value. Same thing. So perceived value, utility value is the value that's derived from how useful Bitcoin is, right? How useful Bitcoin is. And then the perceived value or the speculative value, this is imaginary, right? Let's draw a little stick man and then let's put a little thought bubble like this to represent the fact that that value is perceived. Okay, it's kind of cool. Now I'll justify this statement as we go. The fact that utility value is real, this is real value, right? And then the speculative value is imaginary, imagined. So back to the numbers then. We said that Bitcoin was priced at $6,000. I'm going to write it again because I'm going to scroll the screen in a second. Let's see if this works. I've rotated the damn thing. See how we're used to am to this tool, can't you? So $6,000 is the price. Let's represent this with a rectangle like this. So say this is the $6,000 price. $6,000 would be right there. Oh my goodness, I've not deselected the damn the rectangle. So 6K, this is messy, isn't it? Is right there. Now a portion of this value will be made up of its utility value and some of it will be the perceived value. So if it were 50-50, this would be the, let's put a U there for utility value, and this one would be P for perceived value. So this bottom part, this is the speculative part. It's the section that represents people who are speculating on the future value of Bitcoin and of people who will use it. So they're speculating on how much utility value Bitcoin will have in the future. So that makes sense, right? In fact, you could draw this as a line graph as well. So if I move this over to the right here, we could have like a vertical axis here, horizontal axis here. Nope, I didn't draw a horizontal axis. Come on, horizontal axis, there it is. And let's change the color because this is getting boring. So let's say that over time, if Bitcoin becomes more useful, so we use this blue line, but we don't want it to be a straight line. We want it to be a little bit crazy. So here, let's say this is Bitcoin's utility value over time. If it continually improves as a technology, then that's what the line should look like. It should just gradually increase. However, as more and more people hear about Bitcoin, there'll always be a speculative layer on top, right? So let's draw that in red. So say they both start out at 0, but over time, there's a speculative layer on top. So there is the speculative layer, and here is the utility layer. Now I wonder if I can color those in. I don't know if I've got a bucket tool here. It is. Bucket. Oh, that worked. This is cool. It's like being at school again. So the red part, bugger. That needs to be black. So this is the, the perceived value or the speculative value, and this blue bit is the utility value, right? Now, those proportions aren't necessarily true. I've just drawn that to illustrate the point. So let's really talk about these speculators, because, switching back to the pen, what these folks in the red, the speculators, what they are betting on is that the utility value down here will at some point at least reach the speculative price that they paid. Now I can somewhat illustrate that. So say this is actually the $6,000 price we were talking about. If I draw that right at the top there, these two things are stacked on top of each other. So let's just say, for argument's sake, purely for illustration, that the utility value of a Bitcoin was $2,000, and then the overall price in the market was $6,000. Well, that would mean that the speculative portion of the Bitcoin price was $4,000, right? There we go. So let's remove all that, because I need to use that space again. Cool. So what I was saying about the speculators is that they're betting on the fact that at some point, the utility value of Bitcoin will reach the price that they paid, or the price that they speculated. So you see, let's put this in sort of a pink color there. Now, of course, the utility value of Bitcoin will continue like this. Go down here, get a bucket again, and there. Now that's a little bit daft, because it means that speculation has disappeared. But the point I was making there is that when someone speculates at this point, need to go back to the black, what they're speculating on if they buy it at 6K, right here, is that at some point, this blue utility line, the utility price of Bitcoin, will reach the point that they paid. That's the point I was trying to make there. However, it's not as if there will come a point where the amount of speculation freezes and the two lines meet, like in this example. Like I just said, this would suggest that eventually speculators stop speculating. That's never going to happen, right? And since the perceived value, which is the red bit or pink bit, it always sits on top of the utility value, every time Bitcoin's utility increases, the speculation will always be added on top, right? So we can color all this in red, because that will always be the case. Like that. And remember, the speculative portion is always based on the speculator's belief in the future potential of Bitcoin. So right back here, say this was 2010 at this point, then we could draw like a horizontal dotted line. How do you do a dotted line on this thing? I don't know. But if we draw a horizontal line this way, we can see that there did come a point when, go back to wavy line, here, where the two lines crossed. Oh my goodness, it's getting right messy. Let's use green. So there, right there, was the point where they met. So if you invested right back there in 2000, go back to the black, here, if you invested here, then by this time, whenever this year was, say that was, I don't know, 2012, then utility value would have reached the speculative price that you bet on way back then. However, by this time in 2012, the speculative portion is also on top of that. So this is always the case. There's always a part of the price that's speculative and a part of the price that is utility. So what is a bubble then? A bubble is, when it's not being said metaphorically, a bubble is a sphere with nothing in it but air, right? That's what a bubble is in the real world. So if someone says Bitcoin is a bubble, then they don't understand how Bitcoin has any utility value at all. So they're basically saying it's a bubble just with air in it and there's no actual substance, which, you know, we all know that that's not true. So if someone says Bitcoin is in a bubble, then they are making a reference to the speculative layer that is sat on top of Bitcoin's utility value. In fact, in terms of the word bubble, there is a slightly different way we can draw this graph. If I go to circles here, let's say, what color should we do? Well, we can stick with the colors. Let's say this circle is Bitcoin's utility value, which I will color in blue, and then we'll use the red. So again, I'm actually drawing a bubble here. And then let's say circle. Ah, no, this is going to go on top of the damn thing, isn't it? Never mind. Let's say this. Oh, that didn't work, did it? Yeah, let's say that is the speculative part. Is this going to let me fill it in without... Yes, it did. Nice one. So there we go. That kind of looks like a bubble. So the red bit, am I in black? Yes. This would be the air bit or the bubble part, right? And the size of the overall circle is like the $6,000 price we spoke about, right? Let's bring this back. And we know from our previous example that the red area would, in my fictitious example, say be $4,000. And the actual utility value represented by the blue bit would be, what was it, $2,000? There you go. So this would be the example of where people say Bitcoin is in a bubble rather than Bitcoin being a bubble. If Bitcoin was a bubble in its entirety, there would be no blue bit, right? Because that's the utility value. So in a world where every asset has at least some utility value, going back to my little graph down here, in a world where every asset has some utility, we can say that all assets are in a bubble all of the time, since there will always be some part of the price that is utility and some part of it that's due to speculation, right? So then the question becomes, how much of Bitcoin's price is its utility and how much of the price is speculation or the bubble part? Now, in my fictitious example here, I've just spoken about a $6,000 Bitcoin, which has a utility value of $2,000 and a bubble bit or a speculative portion of 4,000. That's just purely fictitious, right? Just so I could draw the diagrams. But in reality, this is a question that nobody can answer, which is why the question, is Bitcoin in a bubble? It's a completely redundant question. We've already established that the answer to the question of, is X asset in a bubble? Well, the answer is yes, and it's always yes. And even flipping the question to how much of a bubble is Bitcoin in is also redundant, since the only way to get an accurate answer would be to somehow, like we did earlier on, remove all speculation from the market. That's the only way to get an accurate answer. And removing all speculation from the market, that's virtually impossible. And thus, the question of how much of a bubble is Bitcoin in is invalid as well. So the final thing I want to say before I close is moving this away from Bitcoin and say into the ICO space. I'm going to put my little red and blue graph at the top there for reference. So we're going to draw this again, but we're going to use an ICO as an example, say. I'm going to draw a little mini version of this. Hopefully now I know how to use this bloody tool, I'll be better with it. So there, and then a freehand, there we go. Now then, let's say someone does an ICO for a project that never materializes, right? The idea is ridiculous. It's never going to work. No one's ever going to use it. Doesn't actually solve a real world problem. And they never actually build a product, right? That would mean that there was absolutely no utility value, right? So in that graph, there would be no blue area, would there? If the start of the ICO is where we begin here at 0 price, and say the price goes up over time, then the chart would kind of look like this. It would be one great big massive bubble where the whole price is based on a whimsical dream that one day, you know, it will materialize into the empty promises of whatever the hell the project was supposed to do. Now, the point at where, you know, the roadmap of the project isn't being delivered is the point where the price starts to go in the opposite direction. And depending on how steep that, it probably wouldn't work like that. When people start to lose confidence in it, the rate at which the price drops is probably a lot quicker than it increased, right? So I'm going to extend my little graph here, and then I'm going to fill it in with red, like this. So what I've done here, actually, freehand, right there at the peak, this is where this is sort of like where people begin to lose confidence, right? And anyone who had the ability to assess the business case and all that kind of stuff may have been able to see that there never was a blue area here. There never was going to be utility value to the product, or if it never even materialized, or even if it does materialize, if it doesn't have utility, that's exactly what it will look like. And that's one of the criticisms of the cryptocurrency space and the ICOs and the digital assets. The so-called experts are suggesting that a whole raft of these ICOs have this value model where they just will not ever materialize into any real world value and are all speculation and one day will go to zero. So there we go, guys. That is my little, what do you call it, preschool diagram of what a bubble is and why they exist. So I'll say thank you very much for joining me today, guys. If you liked this episode, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you're new around here, get subscribed. And if you would like access to my very best material, such as my structured online courses, they will teach you things like how to make and save money with Bitcoin, check out cryptoversity.com. Alright guys, that's all for today. I'll be back on Monday with another episode of the Cryptoverse. So until then, it's me, Chris Coney, saying bye for now.